Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground Podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and joining me today as a guest, or I could even say a co-host, it's been a long time, but welcome back, Ron Lippock of the Pittsburgh Sports Daily Bulletin. Ron, how's it going?
Great. Is that you? Your voice sounds familiar, but it's been so long since I've heard it.
And, of course, a little bit of an inside joke there, but yeah, it's great to have you back, man. How have things been?
Things are going well. Lots of off-season activity to talk about, so it's been kind of fun to have some fun stuff to dig into.
Yeah, and we're going to be digging into a lot because we're going to have another special guest you and I will welcome on to this show here in the coming days. And I'll just kind of keep that under wraps for now and let that simmer and let everyone think, oh, who can it be? But you know what? That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm sure that guest will have a lot of interesting things to say, but we have a lot of interesting things to say again today too. There's been a lot of news in like the last, 24 to 48 hours. Just Twitter, as I said, I just ran an episode. I was talking about free agents. I was talking about how as soon as someone gets released, Steelers fans think that's the fit. That's the piece that's going to make this a Super Bowl team. And I slammed on the whole like Darrelle Revis idea because I think he's just he's kind of done unless he's going to play safety. I don't think he could play the press coverage they used to. The Browns targeted him like 17 times. I saw somebody tweet that out, and he had like the lowest. Some type of the lowest grade or lowest rating, or gave up the highest quarterback rating, I think it was, of all corners that were targeted last season, which is amazing considering that Antoine Valentino Blake is still playing in the NFL. Well, you know what? What's your thoughts on? Everybody's heard what I had to say about Darrelle Revis. How about you, Ron? What do you think about that?
I think there's enough free agent cornerback activity out there that if they're going to look at someone, I don't think it's going to be him, unless they buy into to his conversation at the end of the season where he said that he was not in shape, he didn't play in shape, he was playing hurt. And unless they can buy into his health, physical acumen turnaround for a year or two, that he wants to win a championship and he will be the player he was off the field, which by what I mean by that is getting back in physical shape, because a lot of what Revis said was he wasn't good last year, not because of a decline in ability, but because of a decline in how he took care of himself. If that happens to change, maybe, but I'm with you. I mean, there's enough good cornerback free agency market out there, and I think the value of those guys is going to drop a little bit due to the depth level of the draft, that people might not be willing to spend as much on a corner this year because they know they can get one in the draft, and maybe the Steelers find someone like a Dwayne Washington, which they've done in the past. This is not new territory as much as people would like to think otherwise. They have dipped into the corner market and gotten starters before. I think maybe a guy like Gilmore or a guy like Prince from like where was he in Tennessee? I think last year, Nakamura.
Yeah.
Guys like that, I think would be a better option, and I think they're out there. And even Dre Kirkpatrick from Cincinnati is another guy that people are looking at. So, and there's rumored to be in the mix on those guys. Again, rumors start from, hey, Steelers might be interested in this guy, to, the game of telephone where all of a sudden the Steelers are about to sign him. And, people need to take this stuff with big grains of salt.
Yeah, there was a saying, and this was a saying back in, some of the guys I've been talking about on this show. I've been saying a lot of the wrestling background, but there was a saying of telegraph, telephone, tele-wrestler. It's kind of the same thing. Telegraph, telephone, tele-football, I don't know, front office staff guy, reporter, or anything. Like Ian Rappaport had said, the Steelers are, Bengals rival, also interested. That's not even say that Dre Kirkpatrick could return back to the Bengals. In fact, we're going to talk about this with the current Steeler, maybe set to hit free agency here within the next week. Is one of these things is sometimes these guys are asking for a certain dollar value or dollar amount that team's not really willing to budge on it. They don't think that it that it's kind of like the stock market. You think there's an inflated value that there really isn't. And when you go out and you have 31 other suitors, you find out that maybe you're not worth $15 million. You may only be worth $11 million or something of that nature. And that's kind of like, you kind of have to set that edge. You can't just throw all of your money into the wind and pay everybody what they want, or else you won't have enough money to spend on other players throughout the season. So there is a ceiling to that. And this, like you said, this little rumor came out that just Dre Kirkpatrick looks like he's going to be available. And somewhere, somehow, a little bird said that the Steelers might have, and they didn't say the Steelers are interested. They said they might have interest. And all of a sudden it's this overblown thing of, hey, here's another guy. Why not sign everybody? Sign Revis, sign Kirkpatrick. You know what? Dante Hightower might be out there too, because the Patriots are.
Bring him in too.
Oh yeah, Brandon Marshall. Oh geez, you know what? That's going to end up on the pet peeves episode that I'm going to do in a little bit because.
Well, but what's interesting here is, and I think sort of what's fueling a little bit of this more so this offseason than ones in past are maybe two things. One, the Steelers have a little bit more cap space than I can remember them having. So there's that, right? So they're actually. Where in years past it was, well, we'd have to cut Ben Roethlisberger to sign that guy. Now it's, they can actually probably do it. Is it in their model to do so? Maybe not, but it is feasible cap-wise. And the second thing is and this is something that I've spoken to in the past, is this maybe a little bit more of a sense of urgency in these next couple of years by the front office, or by the fans, if not the front office, on, riding out Ben's last 2-3 years. I mean, do they get a little bit more of that all-in mindset because they know they got a shorter window? So maybe do they do a little bit more in terms of free agency and becoming a little bit more aggressive just because they know that window's shortening?
It seems almost like the Patriot way, if you want to, and God, do I hate saying that. But you know what? Everybody thinks that, Revis, Marshall, they're going to come here on veteran minimums. It's like these guys don't want to play. They've been playing for a very long time. They've made a lot of money. And unless you are a team, and I know we've got a lot of this to talk about with our special guests coming up in the next show, the Patriots, unless you're a team that's been there 5 straight years, and being there meaning the AFC Championship game. I said this on the last episode. That's what players are looking at when they're looking at a veteran minimum, because Martellus Bennett he wants to get paid now. He's out of there. Chris Long, he took a pay cut. He's got his ring. He's satisfied now. He's out of there. He wants to get paid because you know what? Right. Your commodity is your body, and depending on what position you play, you have a limited amount of shelf life. We're seeing quarterbacks playing into their mid to late 30s and early 40s. Obviously, kickers. I mean, I don't think kickers ever retire. You got several guys that are in their lower 40s playing right now, like Matt Bryant and Adam Vinatieri. They're still getting it done. But, I mean, everywhere else, I mean, a running back, they have a very short lifespan in the NFL. If you're playing on the defense, you start getting north of 30, and same with your receivers and some of your other skill positions, as I said. These guys, they just start to wear down. It's just it's nothing against them. It's just proven. It's father time catches up with you. They want, make hay while the making's good. You know what I mean? So they want to get paid.
But let's not discount the fact that they actually have spent money on top-notch free agents when they feel the need. They're very selective. I mean, look, they've got Kevin Green, they got James Ferrier, Dwayne Washington, especially at that time in the free agency history and the team's history, was a big signing in terms of spend. They go out and get these guys. I mean, Mike Mitchell was just obtained a couple years ago. They go out and get these guys. They don't shy away from that, but they're very selective. They're very targeted. And I've spoken to a few Steelers scouts and front office people in the past, and what they say is they want free agency to take care of the draft, meaning that they want to fill one or two big needs in free agency every year that takes care of the immediate needs. So they can draft guys that can come in and be developed because they don't like starting guys young. So they use free agency to plug one or two holes every year, and they do this every year. I mean, we act like they don't stay active in free agency, but that's not really true. They do. They're very selective, very minimalist, but they do it. And so I don't think that, when people look at the Steelers and say, they'll never do anything in free agency, that's just not true. And I do think they're going to be a little bit more aggressive because they have an adamant need in corner. I think Cockrell is someone they like, but maybe more as a plan B. They didn't exactly give him a high tender. They can lose him if they sign someone else. They have issues with Gay, who I think is maybe on the certainly on the downswing, and they need someone in that slot who can take care of the slot because they can't count on Golson due to his health issues. I think they're to go out and get some guy in free agency who can help in the slot and take care of that position. I don't think they feel really comfortable with Gay. He was one who really, really got abused the most against New England in that playoff game. And I think Golson is still a question mark as much as they like him. So I do think they're going to be aggressive in free agency at the corner position. And by aggressive, I mean maybe they go out and get a slot corner, which in today's NFL is a starter. So, and that would be enough. I think that happens.
I totally agree with everything you said, and you've actually enlightened me to something that maybe I had not thought of in that same way, but absolutely. You look at what they did last year as far as they gave the deal to Darius Hayward-Bay, because they weren't necessarily sure. Well, at the time, I think Martavis Bryant, I think what happened was a series of events was Ladarius Green got signed first because the tight end class in last year's NFL draft was incredibly weak. So they knew they weren't going to get there. They knew Heath Miller was retired already, so you had a hole there. They had probably had a suspicion that Matt Spaeth was going to be on his way out. That ended up happening, I think, mid to late June when he retired. And they knew that Jesse James was a second-year player, that they knew what they had, but they didn't necessarily know how that might pan out. And it probably worked out better than maybe anyone had hoped in Jesse James's case. And of course, everyone was hoping that, and Ladarius Green did not work out the way that everyone had hoped. So, and you're looking at it.
But they did spend that money.
But they spent that money.
Get a guy.
Yes. And they did the same thing. I said Darius Hayward-Bay because at the time, maybe Martavis Bryant, I think they had an indication maybe that he might be suspended or could be a problem, or even from the previous year knowing that he had been suspended, this could be a problem. What do we have here with Sammy Coates? I don't know that we feel comfortable about this. They're looking at the draft. I don't know if there's guys on our board. We have to work on this defense, which they spent their top 3 picks on, of course. And so the same thing, Robert Golden was another one where they signed a safety. They made sure they had some depth there. They knew Shamarko Thomas may not be the answer. Jordan Dangerfield, a practice squad player, of course. So they go out, they sign Golden so they have some depth, maybe a guy who could start if one of the guys they end up getting in the draft, which ends up being Sean Davis, doesn't end up able to start right out the gate at the beginning of the season, having to get some experience. So, yeah, just glancing over that real quick, too, was Ross Cockrell. They could have a hole there. They placed 4th-round tender on him. He's a restricted free agent, meaning the Steelers, they basically have like a week or so. Now, just to explain these things, the tampering period is, I think, set to begin at the beginning of this week coming up, and then free agency officially happens like at 4 o'clock on like Thursday or Friday or something like that. I have to find the official date. I think it was like March 9th or something. So if and when this happens, another team negotiates with like a Ross Cockrell, and let's say they offer him, I don't know, $3 million. I'm not good with figures, Ron. That might be too much for a Ross Cockrell, but the Steelers have the option to say, okay, we'll pay that to him and sign that offer sheet. If they do not, let's say somebody said, oh, well, the Buffalo Bills would like to have Ross Cockrell back, then the Buffalo Bills have to cough up per that tender a future fourth round draft pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers will actually be compensated for losing Ross Cockrell, and they've done the same also with Chris Hubbard as well, though I don't know what type of tender they put on him.
Yeah, I think that's a lower tender because I don't think his draft position was high. They basically get the draft position that I think he was worth.
That's correct.
It would be really interesting if the Steelers go after a guy like Gilmore. It's basically a trade between Buffalo gets Cockrell and Steelers get Gilmore. That could be kind of an interesting swap if that all happened. But it's also interesting, by the way, how little value Cockrell may be valued at. Which also tells you they need a corner. Because if it's a 4th round tender and they sign him for, like you were saying, if it's $3 million a year, $4 million a year, that's nothing for a starting corner in the NFL.
Oh, I'm just making up. I was totally pulling figures from my rear end.
But even if it's 5, a starting corner in the NFL at 5, that's nothing at a guy in his prime. So, in thinking about this, the need for corner is big. And so I do think this is where they go. I think in free agency, I do think they go out and sign someone unless they just keep getting beat to the punch. But there's a number of corners out there. It's a deep draft. I think the Steelers are in a good position to solve corner, at least starting outside corner, or maybe the slot in the draft, and then they find their other corner and maybe at round 2 through 4 in the draft. But I think they're going to take that in the draft. I think they're going to sign a guy in free agency, and I think they're going to use that first round pick probably for pass rush help. And I think that's the way this is all going to play out. And they don't have many needs on this team. They just they need depth, and also the one big we were talking about earlier. The one big sort of mystery piece here is inside linebacker, because if they don't sign Lawrence Timmons, now you got a big question mark. What happens there? Because as much as you like Vince Williams, he's a great backup. He's an average starter. So now you got a question there, and there's a lot of conversation then about what happens there. And if Reuben Foster drops, is that a guy you go after? He probably won't. But if not, then what do you do there? Because that's a position that might need some help too. So that's sort of the mystery piece to all of this too. Do they go after someone in free agency there? That's another place where they could dip into free agency and look at a guy if corner doesn't turn out to be someone that pans out for them.
Yeah, you know what, Ron? I'm totally with you on all of it. We jumped over to the Lawrence Timmons type of issue, and that's kind of one of the guys we were saying, hey, maybe they go out there, they kind of like a Drake Kirkpatrick, go out, see what the market is. And I had mentioned before, this is common practice across the NFL. There's certain guys you don't want going out in the free agency, and you use the franchise or one of the transition tag on, because Le'Veon Bell, you've got a team like the Cleveland Browns that have like $100 and some million to spend, and they could give them infinitely too much time, like too much money. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and then you lose them. So I don't know that Lawrence Timmons north of 30 is like one of those type of guys, but I think they just have to find the right kind of money.
For Pittsburgh, he's a guy I worry about because I don't think they have an answer there.
Oh, I definitely worry
satisfactory. There. Yeah. So I think he's a guy that I think more than even a guy like Cockrell. I think because I do think it's easier to find a starting corner. If you take a guy round 1 like Artie Burns and plug them in early, I think they can adapt. I think it's easier to find a starting corner at times than it is to find a starting inside linebacker in this type of defense. I know guys like Kendrell Bell have come in and done it. It's a rare. And, so I do worry about that spot. Vince Williams can hold the fort, but we see how teams like New England pick apart this defense by finding guys who can't cover tight ends and running backs. That's that position. And so one thing I could see playing out here is if a guy like Timmons isn't re-signed and a guy like Vince Williams becomes your starter, an interesting name out there in the draft. I know we're sort of jumping into draft a little bit here, but the safety from Connecticut is a guy that I've been high on, Evan Ufu. I'm butchering the name. He's a Connecticut safety who's projected to go low end for round 1, maybe high end round 2. Who's a hybrid kind of guy. So you see how New England plays a guy like Patrick Chung. You play him like a linebacker, but he can also cover. If you don't sign a guy like Lawrence Timmons, who's known to be a good cover linebacker too, much to some people's chagrin on that. He lost 15 pounds last year and played as one of his lightest weights ever and covered pretty well actually. I could see them bringing a hybrid guy like that in, playing that guy on nickel and dime, and really using him much as you would have a Lawrence Timmons in that spot. So don't be shocked if they take a guy like that round 1 or 2. That's another wild card in this whole equation is they go safety again and then have him step into the slot role perhaps even and step into Mike Mitchell's role when Mitchell's ready to retire. There's things like that too. There's a lot of moving parts here.
We've been discussing that internally, even at Steel City Underground, as far as we hadn't really dug into the draft yet because we kind of, like you had said, we want to see what happens here in free agency first. Then we could speculate about some of these things in the draft. Like last year, for example, they didn't sign Bruce Gradkowski until after the draft, so they still had a spot for quarterback. They probably had their eye on someone, maybe even like Dak Prescott, and they just didn't fall where they wanted them to, and then they signed Bruce, and of course Bruce got hurt, and they end up picking up Mettenberger. But there's a lot of things that are going to factor into that. My thing with Lawrence Timmons was more or less, yes, it does scare me. I want him here. I totally agree with Vince Williams being a backup. I think he's a solid backup. Everybody is really bought into this standard is the standard thing, haven't we? Because we totally believe when Cam Hayward goes down and it's like, oh, we got a guy for him. Le'Veon Bell goes down. Oh, we've got a guy to replace him.
That's good coach speak, but it doesn't. But yeah, there's a reason why guys are starters and the guys are backups, and there's a reason why guys get paid a lot and some don't. It's great in the locker room, but on the field, at the end of the day, they find the weak spots on a team, and they take advantage of those. And if it's Vince Williams at linebacker, I hate to say it, but that's going to be one of the weak spots they'll target.
Yeah.
And until he proves them different, maybe he does.
I think part of the negotiations last year, and you may have heard these same rumblings, was that the Steelers didn't believe that Lawrence Timmons was a 3-down linebacker, and that turned out to be completely false. I think he played over 90% of the snaps.
Well, they were right. Well, they were right, and here's what happened. He came into camp and shed 20 pounds.
Yeah.
And then he became a 3-down linebacker. So he said, you know what, and that's what James Ferrier did. So he pretty much emulated what James Ferrier did at the end of his career, where he said, you know what, I will be that guy. I'll play at a lower weight. It might hurt me against the run a bit, but I'm going to adjust my body to the game. And that's exactly what he did. He adjusted his body to the game. And I got to wrap up here a little bit, but I think that's going to be an real interesting point here is how they treat Lawrence Timmons and if they re-sign him. And I think they do. That's the guy that's the first ever pick by Mike Tomlin. They say that all the players joke that's his favorite player. That's a standing joke in the locker room.
Yeah, but he is
back. Yeah, exactly. And I think he is going to be re-signed. I think it's just the Steelers like to let the market dictate the price.
Yeah,
I think they're going to let the market negotiate for them, and I think they'll end up bringing him back. I just don't see him leaving.
Yeah, his cap hit last year was just north of $15 million. He had a base salary of $8.7, and a restructured bonus was kicked forward to $6.3. When he originally signed this deal all the way back, I think it was in 2011, and it had been restructured 3 times since. It was a 5-year, nearly $48 million type deal. I think that's where you're getting a little bit of a bone of contention there, where they need the market set. And let's put it this way: you'd even heard the rumblings too that they're talking to him at the combine right now about getting this deal done. Timmons has come out too and said that he wants to be a Steeler for life, just like all of these other guys.
I think, and I'll wrap it up here. But I think he's back. I think they bring him back. I think the big free agent signing is going to be a corner, and it might not be a star corner. It might be a guy like Nakamura who can step in, fill that slot role, which is a key role, and I think this defense will be far better for it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and it's good that you got guys like Kirkpatrick and Morris Claiborne from the Dallas Cowboys who, when you have higher-priced, maybe more valued players, stars, things of that nature in that free agent class, that's going to help bring down some of these other guys who you may not be able to get in different off seasons. So, hey, Ron, thanks for joining me once again. You know what? Tell us a little bit about the book. I know it's been out for a while. I've been reading it myself, but I want you to plug it here for all of our listeners. So maybe if they hadn't heard of it, they could pick up their copy.
Well, I appreciate that. It's called Steelers Takeaways. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. If you're in Pittsburgh, West Virginia, in that area, you can go to the bookstores. It'll be there. I interviewed over 400 former players, coaches, guys that worked with the players and coaches, front office people, all getting their personal stories on how they dealt with the game, whether it's physical issues, whether it's race, religion, humor, a lot of fun stories. And I just got all their viewpoints on, again, from over 400 interviews, and it's all in the book. So I hope you like it, and I hope you go get it. And if you have any, if you want to tweet me, and I'm sure Joe will throw that Twitter account out there, but it's Pittsburgh Sport. So have at it, and I look forward to hearing from you if you do.
Yeah, and so far, and I haven't finished it, but man, it's really good. It's just a matter, we're all busy. We lead some crazy lives, man. But the way it's structured, you're not just reading one thing from one player for a 20-page chapter. It's like it really is different players talking about an era and really painting that picture in that story. So, Ron, thanks again for coming on. Ron Lippock of the Pittsburgh Sports Daily Bulletin. Ladies and gentlemen, that'll about wrap it for us today. You know what? I appreciate your calls and texts. If you have a chance or you have any questions, you can call or text our hotline. It's 203-900-4SCU. Until next time, be safe, be good, and I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.